A family draped in Gucci and dripping with entitlement thought they were the kings of the airport. They saw a quiet black man in a worn-out jacket holding a crumpled economy ticket and decided he was their punching bag for the day. They laughed, they sneered, and they loudly demanded the charity case be removed from their sight. They tried to break his dignity in front of an entire boarding lounge at JFK. But they made one catastrophic, life-altering mistake. They weren't just insulting a random passenger. They were performing their little play of arrogance on a stage he owned in a theater bearing his name. This isn't just a story about a mistaken identity. It's the real-life account of what happens when petty cruelty collides with power, so immense and quiet it's deafening. Stay tuned to witness karma, deliver a receipt that bankrupted a dynasty. The air in John F. Kennedy International Airport's Terminal 4 was a familiar symphony of chaos, the low hum of fluorescent lights, the distant roar of a Boeing 747 spooling up its engines, the frantic beeping of baggage carts, and the cacophony of a dozen languages all blended into a single anxious energy. It was a place of hellos and goodbyes, of new beginnings and somber ends. For Marcus Thorne, it was just Tuesday. He sat quietly at gate B32, a worn, leather-bound copy of Seneca's On the Shortness of Life, resting in his lap. He looked utterly unremarkable, and that was precisely the point. His jeans were faded, softened by years of wear. His simple grey Henley shirt had a small, barely there coffee stain near the collar. The most notable thing about him was his jacket, a vintage leather piece, cracked and weathered, its zipper pull long gone, replaced by a simple paperclip. On his feet were a pair of scuffed work boots that had seen more construction sites than airport lounges. His backpack, slumped by his chair, was a simple canvas affair from a brand no one would recognize. Marcus was a tall man, built like someone who had spent his youth working with his hands, which he had. His shoulders were broad, his hands calloused. At 52, his hair was cut short, flecked with distinguished grey at the temples, and his face was a roadmap of thoughtful lines. He was observing. He always observed. He watched a young mother expertly soothe a crying baby. He saw a soldier in uniform staring at a picture on his phone, a sad smile on his lips. He saw the intricate, beautiful, messy tapestry of humanity passing through this grand cathedral of transit he knew so intimately. Then the tapestry was torn. "Oh, for heaven's sake, Richard, look at this." A voice, sharp and grating as shattered glass, cut through the din. Marcus didn't look up, but his senses sharpened. He knew that tone. It was the sound of privilege looking for a problem. The Davenport family arrived at the gate like a conquering army. Richard Davenport was a man in his late 40s, his face perpetually flushed with an air of self-satisfaction. He wore a crisp monogrammed shirt, a gold Rolex peeking from his cuff, and carried a Toomey briefcase that likely cost more than the monthly rent for a small apartment. His wife Karen was a vision of curated perfection, from her blonde hair, engineered to within an inch of its life, to her pristine white Gucci sneakers. She clutched a Birkin bag to her chest like a holy relic. Trailing them were their 2 teenage children, Chad and Tiffany, both engrossed in the latest model iPhones, their faces illuminated by the blue glow of social media. They were carbon copies of their parents' entitlement, draped in Balenciaga, and exuding a palpable aura of boredom and disdain for their surroundings. They surveyed the seating area, their faces twisting in disgust at the lack of available seats together. Their eyes swept past. Marcus dismissed him, then swept back, a predatory gleam entering Corin's gaze. The only 2 available seats were directly next to him. "Seriously," Karen stage whispered to her husband, loud enough for half the gate to hear. "We have to sit there, next to that..." She gestured vaguely in Marcus's direction, her nose wrinkled as if she'd smelled sour milk. Richard sighed the sound of a man deeply inconvenienced. "Just for a few minutes, darling. We'll be in the first-class cabin soon enough away from the general population." They settled into the seats, an invisible wall of contempt emanating from them. Marcus slowly turned a page in his book, the soft rustle of the paper, a defiant act of peace in the face of their hostility. Tiffany, without looking up from her phone, muttered, "It smells like poverty over here." Chad snickered. "And old books. Who even reads paper books anymore?" Karen placed her Birkin bag on the empty seat between herself and Marcus, creating a physical barrier. She then pulled out a small bottle of lavender-scented hand sanitizer and theatrically cleansed her hands, her eyes flicking towards Marcus as if he were a source of contamination. Marcus felt the familiar, dull ache of it. It wasn't rage. He'd learned long ago that rage was a currency you paid to people who weren't worth the cost. It was a profound, wearying disappointment. He had built empires from dust, negotiated billion-dollar deals with titans of industry, and advised heads of state. He had earned his fortune through grit intelligence and an unshakable belief in building things that last. But in this moment, in his worn jeans and scuffed boots, he was reduced to a smell, an inconvenience. He had chosen to fly economy on this short hop to Chicago for a reason. His old mentor, the man who gave him his first construction job and taught him the value of a level and a firm handshake, had passed away. Marcus was flying back for the funeral, not as Marcus Thorne, CEO of the multi-billion-dollar Thorne Striker Holdings, but as Marky, the kid from the South Side who used to carry his mentor's toolbox. He wanted to feel the ground. He wanted to remember where he came from. He hadn't counted on the Davenports reminding him so crudely of how the world saw men who looked like him, regardless of the contents of their minds or their bank accounts. Richard, feeling his wife's escalating agitation, decided to act. He leaned forward, looking past Marcus to the gate agent, a young woman named Amelia, who was already looking stressed. "Excuse me, miss," he called out, snapping his fingers. Amelia looked over, her professional smile tight. "Yes, sir. How can I help you?" "My family and I are flying first class," Richard announced, as if presenting a royal decree. "I am a Platinum Medallion member with your partner airline. This seating situation is unacceptable. Is there nowhere else for us to sit?" "I'm sorry, sir," Amelia said, her eyes darting around the packed gate. "Boarding will begin in about 20 minutes. I'm afraid all the seats are taken." Karen chimed in, her voice rising in pitch. "Well, that's not good enough. Surely something can be done." "Perhaps you could ask this gentleman," she said, nodding her head at Marcus with unconcealed disgust, "if he would be more comfortable standing elsewhere. I'm sure he wouldn't mind." The entire conversation was an exercise in erasure, talking about him as if he weren't there. Marcus slowly closed his book, the soft thud of the cover echoing in the sudden quiet that had fallen around them. He placed the book on his backpack and for the first time turned his head and met Karen Davenport's gaze. His eyes were calm, deep, and held a weight she couldn't comprehend. He didn't speak. He just looked. He held her gaze until she, the aggressor, the one with all the perceived power, was the first to look away, unnerved by the silent, profound dignity that met her shallow contempt. The battle had begun, but the Davenports had no idea what kind of war they had just declared. The silence that followed Marcus's steady gaze was more potent than any shout. It drew the attention of nearby passengers who began to shift uncomfortably, their phone screens and magazines no longer a sufficient shield from the unfolding drama. Karen Davenport flustered at being outstared by her intended victim, quickly regained her composure, transmuting her embarrassment into renewed aggression. "Well, are you going to move?" she snapped directly at Marcus, abandoning all pretense of speaking through the gate agent. Marcus took a slow, deliberate breath. He could have ended this in a dozen different ways. A quiet word, a single phone call, a flash of the understated black card in his wallet that had no credit limit. But that wasn't the point. Today he was Marky the construction worker's apprentice. He was every man who had ever been judged by the shabbiness of his coat rather than the content of his character. He felt a duty to see this through on their terms. "Ma'am," he said, his voice a low, calm baritone that carried easily. "This is a public seating area. The seats are first come, first served. I am waiting for my flight, just like you." The simple factual correctness of his statement seemed to infuriate Richard Davenport even more. He stood up, puffing out his chest, a maneuver intended to intimidate. "Now you listen here." Richard began, pointing a finger at Marcus. "I don't know who you think you are, but we have paid a significant amount of money for our first-class tickets. That comes with a certain expectation of comfort and security. Your presence is making my wife uncomfortable." "My presence?" Marcus asked, his eyebrows raising slightly. "Or my jacket?" The direct hit landed. Richard sputtered for a moment. "Your whole demeanor, it's unsettling. You shouldn't be in the priority seating area anyway." Amelia, the gate agent, saw the situation spiraling. She walked out from behind the counter, her face a mask of strained professionalism. "Sir, please, let's all remain calm. Everyone is welcome to sit here until their boarding group is called." "This is not about calm," Karen shrieked, her voice drawing more and more stares. "It's about standards. We are premium customers." "He," she jabbed a finger toward Marcus, "is flying in the back of the plane. His ticket probably cost less than my airport lunch. He's probably flying on some sort of discount program. A charity case." The words "charity case" hung in the air, ugly and venomous. A few people gasped. A young man sitting across the aisle began discreetly recording on his phone. Marcus felt a flicker of heat in his chest, the first spark of genuine anger. He thought of his mother, who had worked 2 jobs cleaning offices so he could have books to read. He thought of the decades of 16-hour days of sleeping on concrete floors, of unfinished buildings, of risking every penny he had on a vision no one else could see. All of it, all that sacrifice and relentless drive to be reduced to a charity case by a woman whose greatest life achievement was likely marrying a man with a healthy trust fund. He turned his attention to Amelia, the gate agent. He saw the panic in her young eyes, the way she was trying to placate the Davenports without alienating him. He recognized the impossible position she was in, caught between an entitled customer and a man who refused to be bullied. "Miss," Marcus said to her, his voice still even, "I don't wish to cause you any trouble. Is there a problem with my ticket?" Amelia looked relieved to be addressed so respectfully. "No, sir, not at all. Your ticket is perfectly valid. Am I in the wrong seating area?" "No, sir. This is the general waiting area for gate B32. "Then I believe," Marcus said, turning his gaze back to Richard, "that the issue is not with the airline, but with your personal prejudice." "Prejudice?" Richard scoffed, his face turning a shade redder. "How dare you? I'm the furthest thing from prejudiced I have. We donate to a number of inner-city youth programs. This is about decorum, about basic standards of presentation, the standards you're referring to." Marcus replied, the steel in his voice, now becoming audible, "are about the thickness of a wallet, not the quality of a person. You've made assumptions about me based on my clothes. You've insulted me loudly and publicly, and you have done so with an arrogance that is frankly breathtaking." Chad the son finally looked up from his phone, a sneer on his face. "Whoa, chill out, dude. My dad could buy and sell you 10 times over. Show some respect." "Respect," Marcus said, locking eyes with the boy, "is earned, son. It is not a birthright. And your father at this moment is doing a very poor job of earning any." That was the final straw for Richard. He felt his authority being challenged, his status being questioned in front of his family and a growing audience. His entire identity was built on a foundation of perceived superiority. "That's it," he boomed, turning to Amelia. "I want to speak to your manager. Now, I want this man removed from the gate. I don't feel safe. My family doesn't feel safe. He's being aggressive. File a report. I want him banned from this airline." Amelia paled. The words aggressive and unsafe were trigger phrases in the airline industry. They could lead to security involvement, flight bans, and a mountain of paperwork. She knew Marcus had been anything but aggressive, but she also knew who the airline would likely side with in a dispute between a regular economy passenger and a platinum status first-class family. "Sir, I don't think that's necessary," she began, but Karen cut her off. "Oh, it is absolutely necessary. Get your supervisor, or I will be on the phone with corporate headquarters so fast your head will spin. I'll have your job. Do you know who my husband is?" "Richard Davenport is a senior partner at Sterling Price Financial. We have the corporate travel account with this airline. We are worth millions to you." Amelia's shoulders slumped. She was trapped. She gave Marcus an apologetic look, a silent plea for understanding, before reaching for her radio. "Attention, Matthew Henderson. Supervisor needed at gate B32. Customer service issue." Richard Davenport crossed his arms, a smug, triumphant smile spreading across his face. He had won. He had pulled the right levers of power and privilege, and soon this unsightly problem would be swept away. He winked at his wife. Marcus, however, remained perfectly still. He wasn't worried. He knew Matthew Henderson. Henderson was the afternoon shift terminal operations manager. A good man. A thorough man. Marcus had personally interviewed him for the job 2 years ago. The air crackled with anticipation. The spectators waited for the final act, the arrival of the authority figure, who would surely put the quiet man in the old leather jacket in his place. The Davenports preened, believing their victory was imminent. They had no idea that they hadn't summoned an arbiter. They had summoned a witness to their own execution. Less than 5 minutes later, a man in a sharply tailored suit hurried toward the gate, a look of harried concern on his face. This was Matthew Henderson, a man in his late 30s who carried the permanent air of someone trying to manage a dozen crises at once. His eyes scanned the scene, the furious, red-faced Richard Davenport, his imperious wife Karen, the 2 smirking teenagers, the pale and stressed gate agent Amelia, and the silent black man at the center of it all. "What seems to be the problem here?" Henderson asked, his voice, professional and controlled, directed at Amelia, but loud enough for everyone to hear. Before Amelia could answer, Richard Davenport stepped forward, seizing control of the narrative. "The problem, Mr. Henderson, is a complete failure of customer service and a serious security concern. My name is Richard Davenport of Sterling Price Financial," he said, handing over a business card as if it were a writ of nobility. "My family and I, all flying first class, have been subjected to harassment and aggression from this individual." He pointed dramatically at Marcus. "He refuses to move. He has been confrontational, and frankly, we do not feel safe with him on our flight. I have requested that he be removed from the gate area, and your employee here has been hesitant to act." Henderson took the card, glanced at it, and then looked at Marcus. His professional mask flickered. His eyes widened slightly. A wave of confusion, followed by dawning recognition, washed over his face. He blinked twice, as if to ensure he wasn't hallucinating. The name on the business card in his hand meant something, but the face of the man being accused meant infinitely more. Mr. Thorne. Henderson stammered the name barely a whisper. He took a hesitant step forward, his gaze fixed on Marcus, ignoring the Davenports completely. Marcus gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod. "Matthew," he said, his tone even. "Unexpected circumstances." The shift in the power dynamic was immediate and seismic. Henderson's entire posture changed. The harried manager vanished, replaced by an employee standing before the highest possible authority. He straightened his tie, his face paling. "Sir," Henderson said, his voice now laced with a deep, deferential respect that bordered on panic. I had no idea you were traveling today. Your office didn't. Is everything all right? Is there anything I can get for you?" The Davenports watched this exchange with stunned disbelief. Their smug expressions faltered, replaced by frowns of confusion. Who was Mr. Thorne? And why was a terminal supervisor treating this charity case like royalty? "Everything is fine with me, Matthew," Marcus said calmly. "But this family seems to have an issue." Henderson turned his head slowly toward Richard Davenport, and the look in his eyes was no longer that of a customer service manager. It was the look of a man staring at someone who had just unknowingly lit a match in a dynamite factory. "You," Henderson said, his voice dangerously low, "accused this man of being aggressive." "Yes, he was," Richard insisted, though his bravado was now tinged with uncertainty. "He was insolent and insolent." Henderson repeated the word as if it were a foreign object in his mouth. He looked back at Marcus, then at Amelia, whose wide eyes confirmed she had witnessed the entire exchange. He could piece it together instantly. He had seen this brand of arrogance from premium passengers 1,000 times before, but never ever directed at this man. "Sir," Henderson said, turning his full attention back to Richard, "I think there has been a profound misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding," Karen interjected, annoyed by this unexpected turn. "This man is a problem. Are you going to do your job or not?" Suddenly a crackle came over Henderson's radio, followed by Amelia's voice from the desk. "Dave, we have an update from ATC. All westbound flights, including this one to O'Hare, are now under a ground stop. Severe weather over Pennsylvania. They're estimating a delay of at least 2 hours. A collective groan rippled through the passengers at the gate. The Davenports looked horrified. 2 more hours trapped in this terminal, in this very spot. For Marcus, it was a twist of fate. The universe, it seemed, wanted this play to reach its final act. Henderson held up a hand to quiet the murmurs. He looked at Marcus, then at the Davenports, and made a decision. The public gate area was no longer the appropriate venue for what was about to happen. "Mr. Davenport," Henderson said, his voice now cold and official, "I will be looking into your complaint. In the meantime, given the delay, perhaps you and your family would be more comfortable in the flagship lounge." He then turned to Marcus. "Mr. Thorne, sir, would you do me the honor of joining me in my office? There are a few urgent operational matters regarding the terminal expansion I'd love to get your thoughts on if you have a moment." The contrast was stark, brutal and public. The Davenports were being dismissed, placated with a lounge pass. Marcus was being invited, consulted, honored. Richard Davenport's mind was racing, trying to connect the dots. Thorne. The name tickled a memory in the back of his mind, something he'd read in the Wall Street Journal or Forbes, a name associated with construction infrastructure logistics. a name associated with New York City's biggest projects. His face went white. "Thorn," he whispered to himself, as in Thorn Striker Holdings. Henderson, who overheard him, gave a stiff, formal nod. The very same. The world tilted on its axis for the Davenport family. Thorn Striker Holdings wasn't just some company. They were the primary contractor and majority stakeholder in the consortium that had financed, rebuilt, and now managed the entirety of JFK's Terminal 4. They hadn't been mocking a poor man. They had been insulting their landlord, the owner, the king of the castle, sitting quietly in his own courtyard. Karen's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. The Birkin bag suddenly felt very heavy. Chad and Tiffany finally looked up from their phones, their faces a mask of dawning comprehension as they saw the sheer terror on their parents' faces. The boy who had been filming the incident now had his phone pointed squarely at Richard and Karen, capturing the precise moment their world fell apart. To understand the depth of the Davenports' blunder, one had to understand Marcus Thorne. And to understand Marcus Thorne, you had to go back 35 years to a dusty, sun-baked construction site in Queens. He wasn't born with a silver spoon. He was born with calluses on his hands and a fire in his belly. His father was a bus driver, his mother a cleaner. They were good, honest people who believed in hard work, but their dreams were modest: a steady paycheck, a roof over their heads, a life without crushing debt. Marcus dreamt of more, not just of wealth, but of building. He was fascinated by how things fit together, the intricate dance of steel, concrete, and glass that could create something magnificent from nothing. His mentor, the man whose funeral he was flying to, was a grizzled Irish foreman named Seamus O'Connell. Seamus saw the boy's hunger and intelligence. While other kids were out chasing trouble, Marcus was at the site, learning to read blueprints, mix concrete, and operate heavy machinery. Seamus taught him the gospel of construction: measure twice, cut once. He'd grumble, and that applies to your words and your money as much as it does to a 2x4. Marcus absorbed it all. He worked construction by day and put himself through engineering school at Cooper Union by night, often studying on the subway, his hands still caked with grime. He graduated at the top of his class. While his peers went to work for established architectural firms, Marcus took a different path. He took the small savings he had partnered with a brilliant but eccentric structural engineer named Leon Stryker and founded Thorn Striker Construction in a tiny rented garage. Their first jobs were small, renovating kitchens, fixing foundations, but Marcus had a reputation for being meticulous on time and under budget. He never cut corners. His handshake was his bond. Slowly they grew. They took on bigger projects: a warehouse, a small office building, a shopping center. Marcus had a unique genius, not just for engineering, but for logistics and finance. He saw the whole chessboard. He understood how to leverage assets, how to navigate the labyrinthine world of city permits and zoning laws, and most importantly, how to manage people with respect. The turning point came in the late 90s. The Port Authority of New York and New Jersey was looking for a partner to undertake a radical, multi-billion-dollar redevelopment of JFK's International Terminal. The project was a logistical nightmare, a bloated behemoth that had scared off most of the major players. It was too big, too complex, too politically fraught. Marcus saw it as the opportunity of a lifetime. Thorn Striker, by then a respectable mid-size firm, was considered a massive underdog. But Marcus's proposal was revolutionary. It wasn't just about construction, it was a comprehensive plan for financing, management, and long-term operation. He brought in a consortium of international investors, convincing them with his flawless numbers and his unshakable confidence. He spent weeks walking the old terminal, not with architects, but with baggage handlers, janitors and gate agents asking them one simple question: what would make your job easier? His design and operational plan were built from the ground up, focused on efficiency and the human experience. Against all odds, Thorn Striker Holdings won the bid. The project nearly broke him. There were union disputes, political battles, engineering crises, and a financial crisis that threatened to bankrupt the entire venture. But Marcus willed it into existence through sheer force of will. He was the first on site every morning, and the last to leave his old work boots a familiar sight to every steelworker and electrician. He knew their names, their families. He ate with them in the canteen, his simple attire of jeans and a Henley shirt becoming his unofficial uniform. He never asked anyone to do a job he wouldn't do himself. When the new Terminal 4 finally opened, it was a masterpiece of modern engineering and design. And Thorn Striker Holdings wasn't just the builder. They were the majority owner of the operating company. Marcus Thorn, the kid from the South Side, now owned a significant piece of one of the world's most important gateways. But he never lost sight of Seamus O'Connell's lessons. He remained grounded. He lived comfortably, but not lavishly. He hated the performative opulence of the world he now moved in. He preferred his old leather jacket to a Brioni suit, his worn boots to shiny Italian loafers. He flew commercial, often in economy, because he believed a leader should never lose touch with the customer's actual experience. How could he run an airport terminal if he only ever saw it from the velvet-roped confines of a first-class lounge? His trips to the airport were field research. He'd sit at a gate just like he was today and watch. He'd observe the flow of people, the cleanliness of the bathrooms, the attitude of the staff. He was an anonymous king walking amongst his people, gauging the health of his kingdom. This trip was different, though. The death of Seamus had hit him hard. It was a stark reminder of his own mortality, and the long road he had travelled. He had deliberately dressed in the clothes of his past, a tribute to the man who had given him his start. He was on a pilgrimage, not a business trip. Inside Matthew Henderson's small glass-walled office, overlooking the tarmac, the mood was funereal. Henderson had brought Marcus a coffee, his hands shaking so slightly it was almost imperceptible. "Sir, I am mortified," Henderson said, his voice low. "I cannot apologize enough for what you just experienced. The Davenports, they are frequent travelers, always demanding. But this is beyond anything I have ever seen, to treat you of all people." Marcus held up a hand, cutting him off gently. "Matthew, it's not about me. Don't you see, it shouldn't matter if I'm the janitor or the CEO. The way they behaved was unacceptable. What if I had been just a guy in an old jacket, flying home for a funeral? Would that make their behavior any more excusable?" "No, sir, of course not," Henderson said quickly. "But there's no but. Matthew," Marcus said, his voice firm, but not unkind. He took a sip of his coffee and looked out at the massive terminal, his terminal. He saw the intricate ballet of ground crews, the sleek lines of the aircraft, the thousands of souls passing through. This place, it's more than steel and glass. It's a public trust. It's the first impression of our country for millions of people, and the last for millions of others. We have a responsibility to ensure that dignity and respect are part of the architecture. He turned back to Henderson. The Davenports are a symptom of a larger disease. A belief that money buys them the right to dehumanize others. I'm less concerned with the insult to me and more concerned with the culture that allows a gate agent like Amelia to be put in such an impossible position. He paused, his mind already working, connecting dots, seeing the whole chessboard. "You said his name was Richard Davenport from Sterling Price Financial." "Yes, sir," Henderson confirmed. A flicker of recognition crossed Marcus's face. Sterling Price, their real estate division. They're one of the bidders on the new cargo logistics hub project, aren't they? Henderson's eyes went wide. The cargo hub was the next massive billion-dollar expansion for JFK. It was a Thorn-Stryker project. Yes, sir. I believe they are. Their preliminary proposal is on the docket for review next month. Marcus nodded slowly. The intricate gears of consequence were beginning to turn. Richard Davenport hadn't just insulted a man. He had revealed his true character to the person who held his company's future in his hands. "Get me everything you have on that proposal, Matthew," Marcus said quietly. "And I want the full unedited incident report from Amelia. Also check the gate's CCTV footage. I want to see exactly what happened before you arrived, and find the kid who was filming it. I'd like a copy of his video." He stood up and walked to the window, looking down at gate B32. He could see the Davenports standing there, huddled together, looking lost and terrified. Their world of comfort and certainty had evaporated in a matter of minutes. Seamus O'Connell had taught him to measure twice and cut once. Marcus was now taking his measurements. The cut, when it came, would be deep and precise. The 2-hour delay stretched into 3. The storm system over Pennsylvania was a behemoth, a swirling mass of red and yellow on the weather radar that had brought air traffic across the entire eastern seaboard to a standstill. The atmosphere at gate B32 was a thick soup of frustration and boredom. But for the Davenport family, it was pure, unadulterated torment. They had been offered access to the flagship lounge, but they hadn't moved. They were paralyzed, rooted to the spot, by a fear so profound it was almost comical. They stood in a tight, miserable huddle, speaking in hushed, frantic whispers. The object of their terror. Marcus Thorne was cloistered away in the supervisor's office, a place that now seemed as imposing and inaccessible as a king's solar. "What do we do, Richard?" Karen hissed, her perfectly manicured nails digging into his arm. "What in God's name do we do? I don't know, just be quiet and let me think." Richard snapped back, his face ashen. He was frantically trying to recall the details of the cargo hub proposal. It was a massive deal for Sterling Price, a legacy project for his division. He was the senior partner leading the bid. His entire year-end bonus, his reputation, his next promotion, it was all tied to that project. And he had just spent the last hour verbally abusing the man who would ultimately sign off on it. "Dad, people are staring at us," Tiffany whined, hiding her face behind her hair. The video of their initial confrontation and of their subsequent meltdown upon discovering Marcus's identity was already making the rounds on social media, uploaded by the young man who had been filming. The title was brutal. JFK Karen tries to get man kicked out of airport, finds out he owns it. Back in the office, Marcus was a model of calm efficiency. He had reviewed Amelia's report, which was a masterclass in factual, unbiased reporting. He had watched the CCTV footage, which was even more damning than the cell phone video. It showed Karen physically recoiling from him, Richard puffing his chest out the contempt, clear even without audio. Then Matthew Henderson brought in the file on the Sterling Price cargo hub proposal. It was thick, full of architectural drawings, financial projections and logistical plans. Marcus flipped through it, his eyes scanning the pages with the speed and comprehension of a man who had been reading such documents his entire life. "It's a solid proposal," Marcus noted more to himself than to Henderson. "Ambitious, well-financed." He tapped a finger on the executive summary page. "And the senior partner of record is listed as Richard Davenport." He looked up at Henderson. He must not know that all major infrastructure bids require a character and fitness review for the principal officers. Henderson swallowed hard. "I imagine not, sir." Just then, Marcus's personal cell phone, a simple, unflashy model, buzzed on the desk. He glanced at the screen. It was Liam Chen, his chief operating officer at Thorn Striker. "I need to take this," Marcus said. "It's probably about the quarterly earnings call." He answered, putting the phone on speaker, so he could continue looking at the proposal documents. "Liam, what's the news?" "Bad news, Marcus." Liam's voice came through crisp and clear. "We have a major problem at Terminal 4. A primary water main just burst in the Sector Gamma service conduit. It's flooding the baggage handling system for the B concourse. We've had to shut the whole system down. It's a catastrophe. The head of maintenance is on site, but he's saying it's a 6-hour repair minimum. We're going to have to cancel dozens of flights." Marcus's demeanor didn't change. He was a builder. Problems were simply blueprints for solutions. "Okay, first get ground crews to implement manual baggage transfer for any planes already at the gates. Second route, all inbound flights to the A and C concourses. Third, I need you to coordinate with all airline partners. We'll waive any associated fees for cancellations and rebookings. Issue food and hotel vouchers immediately. Our reputation for service is paramount here." "On it," Liam said. "But Marcus, the cost of this, the overtime, the vouchers, the lost landing fees, it's going to run into the millions. The cost of not handling it correctly will be 10 times that in goodwill. Just get it done, Liam. I'm in the terminal now. I'll walk down to the site myself in a few minutes." "You're in the terminal. Why? Long story. I'll tell you later," Marcus said. "Oh, and Liam, one more thing. Pull our file on the Sterling Price financial bid for the cargo hub. I want you to personally vet the character of their lead partner, a Mr. Richard Davenport. Dig deep. I've just had a very illuminating interaction with him. I suspect he may not align with the Thorn Striker corporate ethos." "Davenport got it. I'll start the deep dive immediately. If he's got skeletons, I'll find them." "Good. Keep me posted," Marcus said, and ended the call. He looked at Henderson. "Well, Matthew, it seems our weather delay is now the least of our problems." It was at that moment that a frantic, overwhelmed Amelia knocked on the office door. "Mr. Henderson, Mr. Thorne, we have to make an announcement. The water main break. We're going to have a full-blown riot at the gate if we don't tell them something." Marcus nodded. "You're right. Let's do it out there. Transparency is key." The three of them walked out of the office and back to the buzzing hive of Gate B32. Matthew Henderson stepped up to the podium microphone, his face grim. Marcus stood just behind him, off to the side, his arms crossed, as he observed the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, your attention, please," Henderson announced, his voice echoing through the gate area. "I am afraid I have some unfortunate news. Due to a major infrastructure failure within the terminal, a burst water main that has flooded the baggage claim system, all flights from the B concourse have been cancelled for the remainder of the evening." The announcement was met with a tidal wave of groans, curses, and shouts of anger. The atmosphere instantly turned volatile. Henderson held up his hands. "Please, please. We understand your frustration. We have a recovery plan in place. Airline representatives will be distributing vouchers for hotels and meals. We will be rebooking all passengers on the next available flights tomorrow morning. All associated fees will be waived. We sincerely apologize for this major disruption." In the midst of the chaos, Richard Davenport saw an opportunity, a twisted, desperate last-ditch attempt to salvage some semblance of his former authority. He thought Marcus was just an investor, a distant figurehead. He couldn't possibly understand the nitty-gritty of operations. Davenport, the financial wizard, would show him how a real leader takes charge. He strode toward Henderson, pushing past frustrated passengers. "This is an outrage, an absolute failure of management," he yelled, making sure his voice was loud enough for Marcus to hear. "Who is in charge of maintenance here? Who is responsible for this? Heads should roll. My firm, Sterling Price, we model risk assessment for projects 10 times this size. This is amateur hour." Marcus watched him, his expression unreadable. He let Richard finish his tirade, let him expose his arrogance and his ignorance to the entire crowd. Then Marcus stepped forward. He didn't go to the microphone. He just stood in the middle of the floor, and a strange quiet began to fall as people turned to look at him. "The man in charge of maintenance," Marcus said, his calm voice cutting through the noise like a surgeon's scalpel, "is a gentleman named Sal Moretti. He has worked at this airport for 40 years. He can diagnose a hydraulic leak by smell." He took a step toward Richard. "The person responsible for this terminal, for Sal Moretti, for Matthew Henderson, for every single bolt and wire and pipe within these walls, is me." He pulled out his phone. He didn't have to look up the number. He hit a single-speed dial button. He put the phone on speaker again, the volume turned all the way up. The voice that answered was Liam Chen's. "Marcus, I was just about to call you. You're not going to believe what I found on Richard Davenport." The entire gate area went dead silent. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Richard Davenport froze his face, a canvas of pure horror. "Go ahead, Liam," Marcus said, his eyes locked on Richard. "I think we all could use a little distraction." "It's ugly, Marcus," Liam's voice echoed from the phone. "The guy's a shark, and not in a good way. We're seeing a pattern of leveraged buyouts at Sterling Price that have gutted employee pensions. Multiple HR complaints against him for verbal abuse, all quietly settled. And worst of all, 6 years ago, his division financed a low-income housing project that was built with substandard Chinese drywall. The firm settled a class action lawsuit for millions. It was all buried in the press. This guy's character, Marcus, it's rotten to the core. He is the last person we want as a partner on a Thorn Striker project." The silence in the aftermath of Liam's words was absolute. Every eye was on Richard Davenport, who looked like he had been turned to stone. His wife Karen was sobbing quietly, her face in her hands. Marcus ended the call. He looked at Richard not with anger, but with a kind of clinical pity. "The Sterling Price proposal for the cargo hub," Marcus announced to the silent crowd, though his words were a death sentence, meant only for Richard. "Is officially rejected as of this moment. Thorn Striker will not do business with men of your character, Mr. Davenport." He then turned to the stunned passengers. "And as for the rest of you," he said, his voice resonating with authority and empathy, "your frustration is justified. This failure is on me, and I will make it right. Hotel food and a flight voucher for a future round trip on any domestic route on us. Matthew Amelia, make it happen." He then turned and walked away, heading toward the service corridors to find Sal Moretti and see about a broken water main, leaving the wreckage of the Davenport family behind him in the stunned silence of Gate B32. Karma, in the digital age, moves at the speed of light. Before the Davenports had even processed the full scope of their public humiliation, the video of the encounter was an inferno on the internet. Titled, "CEO Gets Destroyed After Insulting the Billionaire Who Owns the Airport." It amassed millions of views. The names Richard Davenport and Sterling Price Financial became bywords for entitlement and disgrace. For Richard, the consequences were immediate and brutal. The first call was from Julian Croft, the senior managing partner of Sterling Price, a man who viewed reputation as the firm's only real asset. The meeting the next morning was not a discussion. It was a sentencing. "The Thorn Striker cargo hub contract is gone." Croft stated, his voice devoid of emotion, as the viral video played on a screen behind him. That's a potential 9-figure loss. Marcus Thorne sits on the boards of 3 companies we manage funds for. Our phones have not stopped ringing. An old class action lawsuit your division settled years ago has found new life thanks to the attention you've brought upon us. You haven't just embarrassed yourself, Richard. You've set fire to our house. Richard's pleas for a chance to apologize were dismissed with a cold wave of the hand. You are a liability this firm can no longer afford, Croft declared. Your partnership is terminated effective immediately. Within the hour, Richard Davenport was escorted from the building with his life's work reduced to the contents of a single cardboard box. The financial execution was swiftly followed by social annihilation. The board of their exclusive country club called an emergency meeting and suspended their membership, citing conduct unbecoming of their community. Karen's phone went silent. The friends she once commanded now treated her like a contagion. The entire scaffolding of their privileged life, built on a foundation of money and influence, collapsed because they had revealed they possessed no character to support it. They were forced to sell their sprawling Connecticut estate and downsize to a nondescript rental in a town where no one knew their name. For their children, Chad and Tiffany, the change was even more jarring. Stripped of their private school uniforms and social status, they were enrolled in the local public high school, where they learned the harsh lesson that respect is earned, not inherited. While the Davenports' world crumbled, the scales of karma were balancing elsewhere. Marcus Thorne summoned Amelia, the gate agent, to a meeting. Expecting a reprimand, she was instead met with a warm smile. Amelia, Marcus began, your professionalism under extreme pressure was exemplary. You represented the values we strive for. He informed her that the Thorne Foundation would be providing a full grant to cover her master's degree tuition. Furthermore, he was promoting her to assistant terminal operations supervisor, effective immediately. We build people up here. He told her a quiet indictment of the Davenports' attempt to tear someone down. For Amelia, one of the worst days of her career had inexplicably transformed her life for the better. The incident at Gate B32 became more than just a memory for Marcus Thorne. It became a catalyst. He recognized that the physical structure of his terminal was flawless, but its culture needed reinforcement. He initiated a new company-wide program called the Dignity Mandate, a top-to-bottom review of customer and employee interaction. The core principle was simple. Every person in the terminal, from a first-class passenger to a janitor on the night shift, was to be treated with absolute respect. He brought the newly promoted Amelia onto the planning committee, valuing her on-the-ground perspective. New training programs were rolled out, and policies were implemented to empower employees to handle abusive customers without fear of reprisal, regardless of the passenger's status. The message was clear: a person's ticket class was not a license for cruelty. Marcus also reached out to the film student, Leo, who had recorded the viral video. Instead of a cease and desist letter, Leo received an offer from the Thorne Foundation, a full scholarship and a grant to produce a documentary on the city's invisible workforce, the people who, like Marcus himself, in his early days, built and maintained the world the Davenports of the world simply passed through. Months later, Marcus found himself once again at a JFK gate waiting for a flight. He wore his familiar faded jeans and weathered leather jacket, an anonymous figure reading a book. When a young family nearby struggled, spilling the contents of their bag, Marcus was the first to kneel and help them gather their belongings. "Thank you," the flustered father said. "That's very kind." "We all need a hand sometimes," Marcus replied with a simple smile before returning to his seat. He looked around the bustling terminal, his terminal. The air felt different, lighter. He saw a gate agent share a laugh with a passenger. He saw a cleaner being thanked by a traveller. The changes were small, but they were real. He had faced down ugliness and had chosen not to punish but to build. He had created not just a gateway to the world, but a sanctuary of decency, proving that the strongest empires are built not on steel and glass, but on a foundation of quiet, unshakable respect. The story of Marcus Thorne and the Davenports is a powerful reminder that true wealth isn't measured by the logo on your handbag or the price of your ticket. It's measured by your character. They thought their money made them untouchable, but they learned the hard way that you can be living in a palace and still be morally bankrupt. Marcus Thorne never had to raise his voice. His integrity, his history of hard work, and the empire he built on a foundation of respect did all the talking for him. Karma found its address that day at JFK, and it delivered a bill that an entire family's privilege couldn't pay. If you believe that dignity is priceless, and that arrogance always comes with a hefty price tag, then please let us know in the comments. Have you ever witnessed an act of entitlement backfire so spectacularly? Share your story. And if you enjoyed watching justice being served, please hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to see it, and be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the notification bell, so you never miss another story of karma in action. Thank you for watching.